Welcome to Margot Dreams of Baking. Today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful caramelized onion, beet, and feta cheese tart. Stick around. I love making this tart because it's chock full of flavor from the caramelized beets and onions, but one of the other things I love about this tart is the easy crust. My favorite kind of crust to make for tarts is a pat in the pan crust. I use this all the time for sweet tarts as well as savory tarts. The difference between the sweet and the savory for the crust is I just use a little bit less sugar. So I have 192 grams or 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour in my bowl. And to that I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar and half a teaspoon of salt. And I'll just stir those together. Next, I have 10 tablespoons or 142 grams of unsalted butter that I've melted and cooled slightly. I just stir them together. This looks pretty wet, and you'll think it's too wet for a pie crust dough, but it works perfectly. All you have to do is dump it in the middle of your pan and press it in. So I have a 9-inch tart pan with a removable bottom, and I'm just going to take my dough and dump it into the middle. And then with my hands, I'll just press it over the bottom and up the sides of the pan. I like to try and get as thin as I can without there being any spots that are see-through or cracked. So I end up not using all of the dough, but it's important so that you can add the most filling possible. Now that I've got it basically pressed out, I'm just going around and checking for any spots that might look a little thin, adding a bit of extra dough. And I like to go around the edge and make sure that the dough is all pressed into the corners of the pan and evenly up the sides. All right, I've got my tart shell the way that I want it. So this is going to go in the oven now at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 to 30 minutes until it's nice and golden. The nice thing about this tart shell is I don't need to freeze it or do anything extra other than pressing it in the dough. It doesn't really shrink in the oven, and if it does, it's still movable enough when it's baked that I can press it up. So it's a really, really forgiving dough, and the texture is lovely, almost cookie-like when it comes out. My tart shell is now baked and it's a lovely golden brown. What I like to do to make sure that I have nice straight sides is press a measuring cup around the sides and bottom of the crust on any parts that have puffed up during baking. That will compress it and make sure that I have lots of room for filling. Then I'll let the tart shell cool completely while I make the filling. I'm going to start working on my filling. So I've got about a tablespoon of olive oil in my frying pan, and I'm heating it over a medium heat. And to that I'm going to add 2 onions that I've cut in half and cut fairly thinly. And I'm going to start cooking those until they start to become a bit translucent. So my onions are a lot softer now and they're starting to turn translucent. So now I'm going to add 3 cups of beets that I've grated. You can grate the beets in your food processor and it makes it a lot less messy, or you can use a hand grater, but it will make your hands quite red. And I'm also adding a tablespoon of chopped fresh rosemary and a half a teaspoon of salt. Now you might look at this and think, how on earth is this all going to fit in that little tart pan? But I'm going to cook this down quite a bit, and it's going to reduce in volume. And as it does, it's going to caramelize and get more intense in flavor. And it really makes for a delicious tart. So this is going to take at least half an hour to cook down. So it's been just over 30 minutes, and you can see that my onions and my beets have reduced quite significantly, and they've also gotten a lot darker. So they are now ready. What I'm going to do before I finish cooking them is I'm going to add a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, which pairs really nicely with both the onions and the beets. And I'll cook that for another 1 to 2 minutes until it's well absorbed. And then I'm going to let the filling cool down to lukewarm. Now, you could prepare both the baked tart shell and the filling 1 to 2 days in advance and keep them in the fridge until you're ready to proceed with the next part of the tart. So I've got my tart shell baked and cooled, and my filling has cooled to lukewarm. So the next step is to spread the beets all over the top or the bottom of the pan. It's still a little warm, but it's cool enough that it's not going to immediately cook the eggs. Then over top of that, I've got a half a cup of crumbled feta cheese, and I'm just going to sprinkle it all around. It makes a really nice contrast against the red beets. Now I've got a half a cup or 120 milliliters of half and half cream. To that, I'm going to add 2 large eggs, about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And I'll just whisk that together. And then that just gets poured over the top of the tarts. So now this gets baked at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes until the filling is set. My tart is all baked, and I let it cool for 15 minutes before I took it out of the pan. It's a lovely sunny yellow and red color. It kind of reminds me of a sunset. So what I'm going to do just to finish it is to decorate it with some sprigs of rosemary, and that just references what's inside the tart. And there you go, it's all done. Normally I would try a slice, but we're about to have it for dinner, so I'll wait till then. This is such a lovely tart because the flavor that you get from the caramelized beets and the onions is fantastic, all put together in a quiche-like tart. It makes a wonderful vegetarian meal for dinner along with a salad. I hope you try it. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos.